Welcome back to Late Night. We're here with MSNBC's Chris Hayes. Look, a lot of attention was paid to it today, but do you think, due to all the noise around this election and the long tail of results, that it's fully sunk in the historic accomplishment of Kamala Harris as vice president?
I was glad that it was hammered home today. I do think it hasn't quite sunk in. I mean, at some level, I think there's something kind of good about that, insofar as because that primary cast, that field was so diverse, there was a certain kind of normalizing effect of that. Like,
right,
people gay and straight, black and white, children of immigrant and not, woman and man, like that is how it should be. And I do think that following that for a year and a half sort of created sort of expectations. But of course, it's an enormously consequential moment in American history, and obviously part of the subtext of a lot of the battles that we're having over what the sort of future defining feature of the country is.
When you were here right after the election in 2016, you talked about politics always has sort of an opposite reaction, and this belief that if Donald Trump was the opposite of Barack Obama, there would be an opposite to what Donald Trump brought. In the end, is Joe Biden, is the Biden administration the opposite you thought it would be?
That's really interesting. I think in some ways he is, insofar as, all these jokes about sort of boring or traditional.
Yes.
That here's this person who is wildly untraditional and also obsessive about attention in this way that, broke down all these kind of expectations and norms. Joe Biden is the opposite of that. I think it's deeper than personality, though, right? It's about the way the coalitions react. And I think that, when I was on the show 4 years ago, right after the election, I talked about this sort of opposite reaction. It's like the day after Trump's inauguration, you had the Million Women March, the Women's March, and you had millions of people in the streets around the country. And that didn't really stop for 4 years, right? Like that activated this opposite reaction. And today is kind of the fruition of all that work. All of that reaction of people saying like, no, that's not what I believe my country should be and look like. And that doesn't stop now. Like that kind of the thermostatic reaction of American popular opinion and the way in which opposition formed, like the thing we got to figure out, which I thought Biden spoke about well today, is like how to make the parry and thrust of politics happen in a box that's more democratic and more normal and less threatening about the end of democracy, which is what we've just kind of like narrowly avoided.
Right, which is, again, only 2 weeks ago. And again, President Biden addressed it today. Again, tone is not going to be what solves it. Although I think tone here is helpful because you want to bring down the temperature.
Matters
certainly.
A lot, I agree.
How do you, how does a Biden administration move forward and try to, are these people that can be brought to the table?
I don't know. That is the great unsolved question of contemporary American politics. I mean, one of the lessons Barack Obama learned is that you cannot produce unity or cooperation unilaterally. Like, you can do all the things and you can extend your hand, but if Mitch McConnell's like, sorry, dude, you can't make him do anything.
Right.
So that lesson endures. One thing that I think is different here, and I think this is so crucial, the impeachment, and here's why. In 2009, there was the look forward, not back. There was a desire to deal with the crisis at hand. There was a sense that spending political capital on accountability for the previous administration would be wasted when it could be put to use on, getting the votes now. The impeachment has closed the door on letting everyone just say, well, whew, that was weird, huh? Like, no, we have to go back and litigate that thing. The thing that happened 2 weeks ago, when the mob incited by the president, apparently beat a cop to death, that's not in the past. That has to be dealt with in a formal constitutional procedure in which, before the nation, we will litigate what happened and the president's culpability. And I think that is so important because it demands that we don't just turn the page on it, because we can turn the page on it, because there's going to be a trial, and thank God there's going to be.
Now, of course, we did have, we're in this rare situation where we can see how an impeachment affected Donald Trump and his supporters, right? The first one arguably had no effect.
Yeah.
I bet if you did exit polling on whether or not, people in November were choosing based on...
Oh, I think it had...
This one does feel different. I mean, I might be just wishful thinking on my part that people would perceive this differently.
Yeah, I think, well, he's less powerful.
Right.
He's not the sitting president of the United States. He's not facing re-election immediately. And, I think there's a real choice to be made for the Republican Party and the leadership, particularly McConnell, who I think basically holds his fate in his hands. If McConnell wants the 17 votes.
You think he can get them?
Yes, absolutely. That if he wants them, he can get them. I just think that it does come down to McConnell, and I do think there are probably 17 votes if McConnell wants it to be the case. And what that would mean, I think, is afterwards, were he to be removed, there would be a majority vote about barring him from future office, which I think is a no-brainer. Obviously, this person can't be trusted with the public trust after what he's done. It's not a close call. And, if you're the Republican Party, it's like you have a very rare opportunity that is almost never afforded anyone to, in an official and binding way, repudiate this poisonous presence in your midst. That, you don't really ever get to do that. You can shun people, you can say, I won't take his endorsement, yada, yada. This is like a binding constitutional procedure to say the man has forfeited the public trust.
Well, the interesting calculus, and I think we're dealing with a lot of people who are pretty calculating, is, if you are a Hawley or a Cruz, I would think a specter that would hang over any future ambitions you have for the office of the presidency would be that Donald Trump would run again.
Yeah.
So even though I think they are playing to a base that also supports him and would be furious if they voted to impeach him, what are their odds in 2024 as a actual presidential candidate if Donald Trump decides to run for office again?
I agree completely, and I think that's partly the calculation here. The other part of it, I think, too, is if you're Hawley or Cruz or any of those people, if the party goes in the Trumpian direction, which it may, you're not going to be the nominees.
Right.
Like, if that's the way they go, they're not going to be like, oh, the Princeton Harvard clerk who's got a beard and is from Texas, oh, the banker's son who went to private school and, went to Yale and wrote the book on Teddy Roosevelt, who now is Mr. Populist. I don't think it's happening. I mean, it's going to be like Don Jr. Who are we kidding?
Or somebody who we haven't conceived of yet.
Exactly. Yes.
If Trump continues to, exponentially play out.
Yes.
It will get Trumpier in a way that we cannot.
Yes, we don't know the
conceive
person who has a YouTube channel right now.
Yeah.
That's going to be the next.
Right, who's
Republican
named
nominee.
after a dessert. Yeah. It's like, no, it's going to be creme brulee. He's like this alt-right guy. Hey, you have a fan, somebody that I'm a fan of, Leslie Jones.
Yes.
I think one of the great developments of this past year
So fun.
is that she, Game of Thrones ended and she started watching MSNBC. All the things we could have predicted. But I do, this is one of my new favorite things, is when I have guests on, is showing them a clip of, this is Leslie Jones watching Chris.
He got this condescending, get your together look. Look at this look he got on his face. I am sick of saying this to you, mother. And y'all know that this is wrong, that what's happening. Why ain't you doing nothing? You know what? It, I'm going to Chipotle.
I forget, every time we show a Leslie clip, our energy bill goes up from all the beeping.
Yes.
Hey, I know you're going to be on air tonight for a couple of long chunks tonight.
For a couple long chunks, yeah.
We're very lucky to have you on the air.
Oh, it's so great to be here.